25 years of service.
Agent Marlon Buggs. Commander Michael DeMorat. Judicial Technician Melody Foster. Desk Officer Teresa Goodnight. Lieutenant Joseph Jenkins. Corporal Joseph Petrosky. Deputy Craig Reynolds. Corporal James Stimmel. Media Specialist Katrina Wilson. Agent Vincent Ziccardi.
Years of service.
Commander Paul Ring. Commander Alan Moros. Deputy Connie Hickman. Commander Todd Goodyear. Commander John Mellick. Records Technician Leanna Arthur. Support Specialist Karen Welk. Reserve Lieutenant Francis Cirillo. Agent Robert Wagner. Deputy Richard Todd. Accreditation Manager Enid Borgo. Judicial Technician Britannia Hart. Sergeant Emily Glad.
"35 years of service."
Reserve Deputy Clifford Crosby. Commander James Don. Deputy Lawrence Duguay.
The Lucy Ross Award.
Lieutenant Michelle Patrick has volunteered hundreds of hours of her time as a youth advisor at the Metropolitan Baptist Church in Cocoa. Her efforts have focused primarily on the underprivileged children in the inner city. In her capacity with the church, she assists the youth director with picking up children to attend church services. Lisa also coordinates the church's youth with community involvement such as the participation in the Keep America Beautiful annual Trash Bash, where her supervision and participation led to the collection of hundreds of pounds of refuse. During the holidays, she personally coordinates the collection and distribution of Christmas gifts to a group of homeless children she mentors. Michelle is a true leader that consistently demonstrates her dedication and compassion to those in need and serves as an outstanding example for others to follow.
Volunteer of the Year.
Pat Marshall has served the agency for many years and is presently assigned as coordinator for the South Precinct. Aside from those duties, Pat is intimately involved in precinct-level projects. During this past year, Pat has volunteered over 800 hours of volunteer service in the community. He has also supported and attended over 20 Sheriff's Office-sponsored events. One of Pat's greatest contributions has been his work screening applicants for the Animal Services Unit, vetting and assisting in selecting volunteers to work at our animal care centers and adoption events. The success of our Animal Services Unit is largely due to the wonderful work of our volunteers. Pat Marshall has been a key in identifying and recruiting incredible volunteers. His time and efforts are an amazing reflection upon the Sheriff's Office and a true investment in our mission of service to the public.
Citizen of the Year.
For 4 years, Scott Glover has used his knowledge and experience of financial planning by volunteering his time serving as chairman of the Sheriff's Office Deferred Compensation Investment Committee to assist agency members in reaching their retirement goals. Scott is also the current chairman of the Brevard County Sheriff's Office charity. As chairman, he has donated hundreds of hours in supporting the charity, which was created to help Brevard County public safety members and their families during difficult hardships, benefited children with programs and mentoring, and helped provide the necessary funding and equipment to the sheriff's animal care centers. The sheriff always says that it takes a community to protect a community, and that Scott is a true testament of what happens when community leaders take an active role in helping make our community the best in the country.
Merit Bar Awards.
Sergeant Kurt Benfont, Deputy Taylor Barrett, and Deputy William Gleason turned a routine vehicle crash into a multi-level drug investigation through paying attention to details and displaying commitment to the safety of their community. Their investigation identified and arrested 2 individuals as they attempted to conceal the evidence of their crime. The deputies' actions led to the seizure of 8 pounds of marijuana and the dismantling of a marijuana grow operation. FTO Michael Kornhauser, Corporal David Lovell, and Deputy Michael Matson collaborated in a crime suppression initiative stemming from several shooting incidents throughout the city of Palm Bay. Spearheading the initiative, their efforts led to the arrests of 29 individuals, multiple vehicle and drug seizures, as well as the service of 2 residential search warrants. The 29 individuals arrested were involved in or contributed to multiple shootings that were investigated at that time. Charges included aggravated assault with a firearm, possession of narcotics, and violation of probation. Sergeant Brian Stoll responded to an area in Merritt Island after multiple 911 calls were received about a vehicle traveling westbound in the eastbound lanes. Sergeant Stoll located the vehicle, and after the suspect vehicle failed to yield, Sergeant Stoll utilized the PIT technique to render the suspect vehicle inoperable. It was determined the driver of the vehicle was grossly impaired, and if he had continued to operate the vehicle, would have endangered the lives of other vehicles on the roadway. During the latter part of November 2016, a series of robberies took place within Brevard County. Agents Ronald Beriel and Jeffrey Colon began the investigation, starting with a few grainy videos that linked a vehicle to several of these crimes. The agents eventually succeeded in identifying the vehicle involved and also learned that the possible suspect had been arrested out of county on unrelated charges in the vehicle. These agents traveled out of county serving a search warrant, collected evidence connected to these crimes, and obtained a confession from the suspect, successfully closing 7 robberies that occurred throughout the county. While investigating a home invasion robbery, agents Ronald Beriel and Peter Steed determined that a group of suspects were responsible for this and a series of violent crimes. Surveillance video enabled Beriel to identify members of the group. After learning that one suspect had been arrested, the agents met with the suspect and obtained a confession to the home invasion robbery. After corroborating information provided by the suspect, an arrest warrant was gained for another member of the group. The suspects were located and arrested at a motel in Volusia County, where they were found to be in possession of multiple firearms and thousands of dollars in stolen jewelry.
Life-Saving Awards.
Corporal Kelly Dobson, Deputy John Vaughan, and Deputy Joseph Jenkins Jr. responded to a residence to assist with a medical emergency. While assessing the situation, Deputy Jenkins discovered that the victim was not breathing and did not have a pulse. The deputies then initiated CPR, administering over 14 rounds of chest compressions and 3 AED shocks to the victim. The deputies provided the necessary care to sustain his life until Brevard County Fire Rescue could arrive on the scene, and if not for their actions, the victim would have certainly passed. Deputy Jerry Patterson responded to a residence in Indy Atlantic for the report of a medical emergency where CPR was in progress. The victim was found on the floor of the home by the neighbor, not breathing and unresponsive. Deputy Patterson arrived on the scene and confirmed the victim had no pulse and was not breathing. After Patterson administered CPR, he revived the victim, who regained her pulse and began to speak. Deputy Patterson's expedient actions prevented the loss of a victim's life. Corporal Thomas Case and Deputy Patrick Hannigan responded to a Mirror Island residence in reference to a female who was unresponsive and not breathing. Upon arrival, Deputy Hannigan and Field Training Officer Thomas Case performed CPR, reviving the female victim, who was transported to a nearby hospital. Although the female ultimately succumbed to her illness, she was able to spend time with her family members as a result of the life-saving efforts of the deputies. Deputy Keaton Morden and Deputy Tanisha Hempel responded to a residence in Cocoa for a possible drug overdose. Deputy Morden arrived on scene and determined the male was not breathing and did not have a pulse. Deputy Hempel began CPR while Morden deployed his AED. After an exhaustive 7 rounds of CPR were conducted by the deputies, Brevard County Fire Rescue arrived and assumed the life-saving efforts. The male was transported to a nearby hospital and stabilized. Deputy Morden and Deputy Hempel's efforts were essential in the saving of the male's life. On April 26, 2016, Sergeant Craig Edelman and Deputy Michael Coppola responded to a medical emergency of an unresponsive male not breathing. Deputy Coppola started chest compressions while Edelman deployed his AED. The deputies shocked the victim with little to no effect and then began CPR. After approximately 10 rounds of CPR, the AED advised to shock again. This time, the male's heart began beating and he started breathing on his own. The victim was ultimately transported to a nearby hospital where he made a full recovery. Sergeant Carl Sangalier, Corporal Kelly Dobson, and Deputy John Vaughan were dispatched to a suspected drug overdose. As they arrived on scene, they determined the victim had overdosed by injecting a combination of drugs. He was not breathing and did not have a pulse. All 3 deputies immediately began working together to save the man's life. After minutes of CPR, the AED was activated and an assessment of the victim detected a pulse. Sergeant Sangalier continued with rescue breathing for the victim for the next few minutes until medical professionals from Brevard County Fire Rescue arrived on the scene. Deputies Jeremy Hart and Robert Rowell responded to a medical emergency where it was reported a man was unresponsive, not breathing, and did not have a pulse. Immediately upon arrival, Deputy Hart activated his AED and initiated chest compressions. Deputy Rowell provided rescue breaths, and after 4 cycles of chest compressions and rescue breaths, BCFR arrived on scene and assumed the life-saving efforts. The victim was transported to a nearby hospital where he was listed in stable condition and survived the incident. Corporal Williams and Deputy Bruno responded to a residential medical emergency with an unresponsive female victim where CPR was in progress. Upon Williams' arrival, he found the unresponsive female and quickly deployed his AED while he performed chest compressions and a family member delivered rescue breaths. As CPR continued, Deputy Bruno arrived on scene and took over chest compressions. Corporal Williams and Deputy Bruno continued to provide emergency care for the victim until Brevard County Fire Rescue arrived on the scene. The victim was transported to a nearby hospital where she made a full recovery. Deputy Benjamin Brown was alerted that a man was on top of the Hubert Humphrey Bridge and it appeared he was going to jump. As Deputy Brown reached the top of the bridge, he observed the male with 1 foot on a bucket and his other foot on the top rail of the bridge. Brown exited his patrol vehicle and slowly walked towards the male. He made several attempts to engage the male in conversation, but the male would not speak with him. When Brown got within reach of the suspect, he placed him in a bear hug and then pulled him away from the railing to safety. Deputy Brown's quick and decisive actions surely prevented the situation from ending tragically. Deputy Zachary Ferreira responded to a residence for a medical emergency where a male victim was unresponsive and not breathing. Upon arrival, Deputy Ferreira observed the male victim lying on his side and began CPR. After several minutes, he was able to regain a pulse. Brevard County Fire Rescue then arrived on scene and assumed the life-saving measures. The male's pulse grew stronger and he started breathing on his own. Due to the quick actions and life-saving efforts of Deputy Ferreira, the male made a full recovery. Sergeant Jesse Forrest and Agent William Fletcher responded to a medical emergency service call where they found several civilians providing CPR. Agent Fletcher immediately resumed CPR on the victim while Sergeant Forrest retrieved his AED. The deputies then delivered a shock to the victim and continued CPR until Brevard County Fire Rescue arrived on the scene, transporting the victim to a nearby hospital where he received follow-up care, making a full recovery. Sergeant Forrest and Agent Fletcher's quick actions made it possible for the victim to be alive today. Agent Leonard Jones was assigned the investigation concerning an endangered suicidal adult male. Realizing the urgency of the situation, he began researching the victim's activities, which led to a possible location. Agent Jones then directed patrol units to check the location. The responding deputies arrived to find the victim sitting in a vehicle with a hose running from the tailpipe to the interior of the car. The unconscious victim was transported to a local hospital for treatment, where he made a full recovery. The victim would have no doubt perished if he had not been located and assisted in such a timely manner by Agent Jones. Deputy Joseph Spinelli and Deputy Gregory Matthews responded to a medical emergency call. Spinelli arrived on scene first, entered the residence, and located a female victim unresponsive. He immediately began CPR and Deputy Matthews assisted. Upon deploying an AED, the female regained a pulse and began taking shallow breaths. Thanks to the efforts of Deputy Spinelli and Deputy Matthews, the victim made a full recovery. Deputies Robert Rowell and Dylan Packard responded to a medical emergency call and upon arrival immediately began CPR on the victim. After approximately 3 rounds of CPR, Deputy Rowell and Deputy Packard were able to regain a pulse and the male started breathing. Brevard County Fire Rescue transported the male to a nearby hospital where he was stabilized. The quick and professional actions by Deputy Rowell and Deputy Packard saved the victim's life. Deputy Lance Beringer responded to a medical emergency regarding a possible drug overdose. Upon arrival, he found a male lying on the ground, not breathing and unresponsive. Deputy Beringer immediately began CPR, and when Brevard County Fire Rescue arrived on the scene soon after, the male was transported to a nearby hospital where he was treated. Deputy Beringer's life-saving efforts ultimately led to the full recovery of the victim. Deputy Benjamin Fisher and Deputy Jesse Doucette responded to a residence in reference to a female who was unresponsive. Deputies Fisher and Doucette immediately began CPR, and after multiple exhaustive rounds of CPR, they could feel a faint pulse. Brevard County Fire Rescue arrived shortly after her pulse returned and took over life-saving efforts. The female was ultimately transported to the hospital where she made a full recovery. If not for the efforts of both Deputy Fisher and Deputy Doucette, the victim would not be alive today. Deputy Michael Harisco responded to a report of a male not breathing. Shortly after arrival, a distraught female exited the residence, crying and waving for Deputy Harisco to come to the residence. Harisco then observed an unconscious male. Without hesitation, he started CPR with over 6 sets of chest compressions and rescue breaths. Brevard County Fire Rescue arrived on scene and assisted Deputy Harisco with CPR. Harisco then used a bag valve mask to provide oxygen for the victim until he started breathing again on his own. The victim was then transported to the hospital where he made a full recovery. Corporal Justin Hope and Deputy Derek Willen responded to a call regarding an unresponsive female victim. After several rounds of CPR, the victim regained a pulse and was transported to the hospital, where she is expected to make a full recovery. For their efforts, Deputies Willen and Hope are both awarded life-saving bars.
Unit Citation Award.
As Hurricane Matthew bore down on Brevard, the projected landfall target was Port Canaveral, with expected catastrophic winds and a deadly storm surge. The decision was made to weather the storm from the port based on the potential of damage to the surrounding bridges that would not permit a return to protect the citizens who chose to remain, or the property of so many who chose to leave. Seaport Security Manager John Brady was tasked with conducting assessments primarily on the south side, where stores of highly volatile chemicals are securely stored in large quantities. Brady enlisted the assistance of Commander Stephen West to accomplish this task so he could observe any damage and risks in order to properly arrange and deploy U.S. Coast Guard assets. A team consisting of Brady, West, John Cunningham, and Dave Sargent assembled to enter the restricted areas. As they were doing so, a sheet of metal roughly 6 feet by 10 feet dislodged from the overhead concrete structure as a result of the damaging wind and struck Commander West in the head, resulting in a critical head injury. Brady, Cunningham, and Sargent jumped into action, administering life-saving first aid and arranging for emergency medical transport. Canaveral Fire Rescue personnel then arrived on scene, and Captain Derek Yosifon, firefighter Jeff Crawley, firefighter Randy Hoke, and fire medic Mike Penner immediately assumed providing the life-saving treatment. The transport ambulance was on Merritt Island and high winds prevented its eastbound approach. Thus, the decision was made to transport Commander West on a backboard in the rear of Captain Yosifon's truck to the waiting ambulance in Merritt Island. It was determined that Commander West had sustained a fractured skull, which required immediate surgery to remove bone fragments from his brain, coupled with severe bleeding. Due to the incredible efforts by all involved, Commander West made a full recovery. Additionally, through the efforts of U.S. Coast Guard Commander Stephen West, CPA CEO Captain John Murray, CPA Director Jim Reynolds, BCSO Commander Alan Moros, BCSO Maritime Security Manager John Brady, and Cape Canaveral Volunteer Fire Department Chief Dave Sargent, an efficient and effective incident plan was prepared, protecting the employees, businesses, and assets of Port Canaveral. We are also very proud to extend a medal we hold quite sacred to Commander Stephen West for risking his life in the protection of the citizens of Brevard County, the Wound Bar.
Special Recognition Award.
After a successful career in the United States Air Force and retiring at the rank of Master Sergeant, Al Wells joined the Brevard County Sheriff's Office. Throughout his 22-year career, he has played an integral part in fulfilling the mission of the Sheriff's Office. Corporal Wells has been an active participant in the BAM program, where he is instrumental in making a difference with the youth of our community in an effort to keep them out of the criminal justice system. Corporal Wells leads the agency's Honor Guard and coordinates numerous events and appearances. He also proudly represents the agency at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., Police Memorial Week in Tallahassee, and has coordinated countless funeral and memorial services for fallen officers, retirees, and their families. Demonstrating compassion, kindness, and making a difference in the lives of others is what he is best known for. Corporal Wells is an invaluable member of our team, embracing and embodying our mission to serve the citizens of Brevard County.
Reserve Deputy of the Year.
Sergeant Rick Schmidt is the supervisor of the Mounted Unit. Rick personally planned and supervised all training for the Mounted Unit and additionally coordinated training with the Toronto Police Department, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and the National Police Service's Mounted Units. Rick even invited these trainers into his home and at his own expense provided them with food and lodging during their stays in Brevard County. Rick has volunteered over 600 hours and attended every Mounted Unit event, including parades, static displays, and patrols. Rick utilizes his 40 years of equestrian experience to make our Mounted Unit one of the most effective and best trained units in the state of Florida. No matter what task Rick is assigned, he enthusiastically executes the agency's mission.
Communications Officers of the Month.
While working the West Primary Radio, Communications Officer Nicole Avila answered a 911 emergency call where the caller reported their mentally challenged teen daughter had been missing for over 3 hours. Nicole gathered the pertinent information as she maintained the busy radio channel and coordinated efforts between the Road Patrol, K-9, and the Aviation Unit. Nicole's calm demeanor led to the successful resolution of the missing child. While working the West Primary Radio, Communication Officer Angie Velton answered a 911 emergency call reporting an in-progress shooting. The caller advised the location and that there were injuries. Without hesitation, Angie dispatched the call as she continued to gather information from the caller. Angie seamlessly provided the responding units with a suspect vehicle description and possible suspect information. She then initiated emergency traffic and assisted in the coordination of all responding units. Angie is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her actions. Communications Officer Michelle Taylor received a 911 emergency call that was extremely hard to understand. Taylor was able to obtain the address from the caller and relay the information to Patrick Air Force Base. The base operator advised they were having difficulty understanding the caller as well, and then advised they would be responding and ended the call. Michelle decided to stay on the line, where she learned from the caller that she was suicidal, armed, and had shot herself. Michelle's efforts prevented first responders from being met by a suicidal patient with a loaded firearm. Michelle is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her actions. While working the West Precinct primary radio, Communication Officer Andrew Polk was advised by a deputy they had been struck by a suspicious vehicle that then fled. Polk immediately alerted surrounding units and had backup responding to the injured deputy while simultaneously updating the call for service, as the suspect then called 911 and threatened to intentionally crash and harm any deputy he saw. Polk relayed questions from the deputies back to the call taker until the suspect agreed to pull over. Andrew is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for his actions. In May 2016, the Melbourne Police Department contacted the BCSO Communications Centre seeking assistance as they were in pursuit of 3 armed robbery suspects, and the vehicle was approaching the Osceola County line. Supervisor Cheryl Pollitier took command of the situation, instructing MPD to release the connection to countywide and then utilize the Florida Interoperability Network to create a bridge between Brevard and Osceola's radio. She then patched MPD's primary, countywide, and Alert 1 into the bridge with Osceola, allowing all participating units to seamlessly communicate with Osceola. Cheryl is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her actions. Communications Officer Lindsay Stanley received a 911 hang-up. Lindsay immediately called the number back, and a male advised he had just been robbed and disconnected. Lindsay then called the male back again, and the caller continued to disconnect the call after answering a single question or two. Lindsay displayed unusual thoroughness and determination by continuously calling the victim back and getting the information needed to result in the successful capture of the suspect. Lindsay is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her actions. In July 2016, the Communications Unit was advised of an active shooter incident occurring at Parish Medical Center. Communications Officer Bernard coordinated the responding units with TPD dispatch. While handling the exceptionally busy radio, she made meticulous CAD entries tracking the unit's positions and room numbers as they were cleared. Assistant Supervisor Trejo worked behind the scenes with the on-scene supervisor and was integral in obtaining resources and establishing communications. Both Stevie Trejo and Nicole Bernard were instrumental in the successful resolution of the active shooter event. Both are being presented a Bar of Merit for their efforts. Communications Officer Alicia Robin was working the North Precinct radio when she heard Titusville Police Department radio traffic concerning an officer-involved shooting with the suspect fleeing. She immediately reacted, coordinating response with TPD and dispatching BCSO units to assist. Alicia's quick actions and ability to monitor multiple radio channels was instrumental in getting the needed backup to the Titusville officers. While working the South Radio, Communications Officer Peggy Human dispatched a missing endangered person call regarding a 77-year-old female that suffered from dementia. Multiple units responded to assist in the search, as well as canine and aviation units. Peggy was able to not only dispatch calls and maintain her primary radio traffic, but was also able to successfully monitor and address the radio traffic concerning the missing person. Due to her exceptional experience, Peggy was able to make it look easy. Peggy is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her actions. Communications Officer Michael Tarr's efforts and actions were brought to the attention of the Awards Committee for 6 different events during the course of 2016. From addressing an influx of high-priority calls to effectively dealing with a deadly vehicle crash, an overturned boat, a foot pursuit, and a battery where the suspect was continuing to chase the victim, or his handling of emergency activation of a deputy's radio during a violent struggle. Communications Officer Tarr is clearly an excellent communications officer and a valued member of the BCSO team. shift supervisor Laurie Fetterplace received a call from a male who at the time was making threats to end his life. Laurie talked with the male to obtain information as long as he would talk before he disconnected. When the deputies arrived, a knife was located next to the male, who stated he had intended to use this knife to end his own life, then disclosed that if it were not for Miss Laurie taking a personal interest to help, there would have been a much different outcome.
Communications Officer of the Year.
In October 2016, just days before celebrating her 20-year anniversary with the Sheriff's Office, Communications Officer Nancy Hinkle succumbed to her brave 7-year battle with cancer. No words can describe her strength and commitment that she demonstrated as she absolutely refused to give up and continued working through her pain and difficulties. It was at times easy to forget she was sick, as she always came to work with a smile and a positive can-do attitude. Nancy served as a communications officer, training officer, assistant shift supervisor, and a shift supervisor during her career. Nancy was a valued member of our agency who will be greatly missed.
Employee of the Month.
Crime scene investigator Emily Cretion responded to the crime scene of an armed robbery. The suspect had fled, but left behind a hat, firearm, and a plastic bag. Cretion collected the evidence, transported the items for processing, and was able to develop areas of friction ridge detail, which subsequently identified a suspect. This provided the definitive piece of physical evidence needed to charge the suspect. Her meticulous processing and attention to detail was exceptional. Emily is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her efforts. The Animal Services Unit was requested to assist a landowner in removing animals. The horses needed to be bridled and given medical tests prior to being transported. Supervisor Stephen Anderson called Animal Enforcement Officer Lexi Applegate to assist. Feed was used to lure the horses where they could be calmly bridled and the vet could perform the tests. The pigs were in a pen completely filled with mud and feces. They both entered the pen and moved the very large pigs. Steve and Lexi's actions helped secure and save these animals, and they are being presented with a Commendable Service Award for their efforts. In February 2015, the jail system was converted to a new and upgraded jail management software and hardware system. During that time, Clerk Catherine Waldenberger and Clerk Elizabeth Curisneto worked together and innovatively created the processes needed for the new system to prepare the information. They designed the elements needed to address the information and eliminate the waste of hundreds of manpower hours. Additionally, both are being presented with Commendable Service Awards for their efforts. Yvonne Miller has been employed with the Sheriff's Office since July 1993 and is widely known for her nickname Sunshine. This is largely in part to her positive attitude and caring and giving personality. Her motto is, "Teamwork makes the dream work." Sunshine recognizes that the most important asset we have is our employees and is always monitoring the pulse of the office, making sure they are okay. Her attention to detail and willingness to go above and beyond is amazing. Sunshine is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her efforts. Ellen Kurtziel accepts a variety of projects without hesitation. She is the Secretary for the Civil Service Board and Secretary for both the Deferred Compensation Committee and the BCSO Public Safety's Charities Board. Ellen has volunteered to assist in the implementation of a new law enforcement sergeant promotional testing process. She is a behind-the-scenes superstar whose efforts make the Human Resources Office and agency shine. Additionally, Ellen is being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her efforts. On June 12, 2016, one of the worst mass shootings to ever occur in the U.S. happened in Orlando at the Pulse nightclub. A response was requested from our agency as part of the Florida Crisis Response Team. Cynthia Carlson, a member of our Victim Services team, immediately responded to Orlando with invaluable assistance, and Cynthia is being presented with a bar of merit for her efforts. As a participant of the Central Florida Intelligence Exchange and working closely with Homeland Security investigations, Dana Shabana reached out to CFIX personnel to offer her assistance. Being fluent in Arabic, Dana provided a vital support during the course of this investigation. Additionally, Dana is being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her efforts. After a complaint concerning a puppy's well-being was received, Animal Enforcement Officer Dale Craig responded to ascertain the well-being of the puppy, where he witnessed several chronic physical conditions. Based on the condition of the dog, Craig contacted his supervisor, Steve Anderson, and the Palm Bay Police Department to respond to the scene. Due to the extreme case of cruelty and the specialty nature of the investigation, animal cruelty investigator Doug Scragg assumed the investigative lead in the case, which resulted in an arrest warrant for the owner. As a result of their dedication and commitment, Investigator Scragg, Supervisor Anderson, and AEO Craig are being presented with Commendable Service Awards. For years, the agency has observed significant mechanical problems associated with the Dodge Charger and Chevrolet Impala. These vehicles were routinely sent to the dealerships for repair, with an average total annual cost of $39,000 for the agency, plus lots of downtime for these vehicles. Mechanic Terry Lorna researched the flaws and innovatively created a repair process to address the issues. By addressing the needed repairs in-house, the agency saw a savings in excess of $27,000 over 2016 alone. Terry has also taken it upon himself to personally train the other mechanics in the repair process, thereby further reducing downtime. Maritime Security Officer Joe George noticed a black liquid substance by the dock, where a ship was currently offloading. George immediately had the ship's crew cease pumping the liquid until the material could be identified and contained. It was later determined that approximately 300 gallons of liquid asphalt had spilled and was slowly making its way towards a drain. If George had not taken such quick and decisive action, approximately 12,000 gallons of asphalt would have spilled into the pristine waters of Port Canaveral, causing irreparable environmental damage. MSO George is additionally being presented with a Commendable Service Award for his efforts. IT specialist Kevin Rose has done an outstanding job in providing customer service support to the Sheriff's Office and specifically the Animal Services Unit during 2016. Throughout the year, Animal Services had several relocations and office changes, requiring the reworking of networking and problem solving. Kevin continuously displayed flexibility, a positive attitude, and the technical skills necessary to reduce downtime by the Animal Services staff. Kevin embraces customer service and considers every employee of this agency his customer. Inmate Information Clerk Joanne Lombardosi observed a released inmate who was physically handicapped and falling in the lobby. She immediately assisted the man who was unable to walk and then arranged for a wheelchair and taxi so that he could get home, preventing possible injury to this former inmate. She also was recognized for observing another released inmate who was acting depressed, feeling hopeless after 9 years in prison and nowhere to go. She requested a patrol deputy evaluate the subject and treatment was arranged. Joanne is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for her efforts.
Employee of the Year.
Over the past several years, Staff Assistant Jean Palmer has been an integral part of her agency in both its internal mission and external community outreach. Her ability to coordinate and serve in both of these important roles is worthy of commendation. Jean provides administrative support for the CIS commander and supervisory staff. Her office is a crossroads of investigative agents, analysts, forensic technicians, and supervisors. She also coordinates the activities for the 6 assistants that support the nearly 100 CIS members. Jean has a never-say-no attitude. In a recent case, Jean assisted agents with a large-scale search operation at the county landfill. She spent days scouring the landfill for critical evidence, never once complaining or refusing to work with her team. Jean regularly assists with functions that fall well outside of her job description in order to contribute to the success of the Sheriff's Office mission. Jean believes in giving back to the community she serves. Jean Palmer's energy and dedication to our agency and community causes seems to be limitless and is quite remarkable. Jean is being recognized with a Commendable Service Award for her efforts.
Corrections Deputies of the Month.
Corrections Deputy Michael Romer was assigned to booking when a patrol deputy brought in an arrestee. When the deputy escorted the inmate to the interview room, Deputy Romer smelled a strong odor of what he believed to be marijuana. Romer first conducted a pat-down search and then a scan of the inmate utilizing the full-body digital security screening system with negative results. Undeterred, Deputy Romer conducted a search of the clothing and discovered a plastic bag concealed in the inmate's clothing containing marijuana and crack cocaine. Sergeant Lawrence Manley, Sergeant James Moffett, Corporal Kimberly Hall, FTO Christina Lewis, and FTO Daniel Sassino demonstrated true dedication by conducting an extensive review of all daily trainee observation reports, performing face-to-face interviews with each trainee affected to verify they were proficient in all tasks and post-assignments identified in the daily observation reports. This review encompassed 25 trainees and over 300 reports, assuring that all trainees were 100% proficient in all tasks and post-assignments and that the jail complex was in compliance with training standards. Each is being recognized with a Commendable Service Award for their outstanding efforts. Corrections deputies Jessica Michaud and Jason Lewis observed a female being received at the jail acting suspiciously. Believing the individual was under the influence of a controlled substance based on her behavior, their suspicions were confirmed when illegal drugs were located within the woman's clothing. The female then admitted that she had ingested a large amount of the drugs. Within seconds, she began a drug-induced seizure and was quickly transported to a nearby hospital. The deputies' actions aided in saving a life, as well as keeping illegal contraband from entering the jail. Both are being presented a bar of merit for their efforts. Corrections Deputy Freya Durance brought an inmate into the Sally Port and informed Corrections Deputy Jose Centeno that during the transport she witnessed the inmate reaching into his waistband area. Deputy Centeno began a pat-down search of the inmate and located a controlled substance. If not for the attention to detail and thoroughness in the situation by these two corrections deputies, the harmful contraband would have entered into the facility. Corrections Deputy Kyle Leidner was on his way home after his shift when he witnessed a crash involving two tractor-trailers. Deputy Leidner immediately pulled over to render assistance and observed a fire in the engine of the truck and that the driver's door was crushed shut. Taking immediate action, Leidner extinguished the fire and pried open the door of the tractor-trailer to gain access to the driver. Although he could not remove the driver, he kept him calm until BCFR arrived, risking his own personal safety to render aid. Deputy Leidner is also being presented a life-saving bar for his efforts. Field Training Officer Benjamin Smith and Corporal Troy Robertson were searching inmate property when suspected information about terrorist acts was observed. As evidenced by other recent events, the deputies recognized the seriousness and the potential for criminal acts and ensured the proper authorities were notified. Smith and Robertson are being presented with a Commendable Service Award for their efforts. Sergeant Robert Lowe and Sergeant Evelyn DiNardo assisted a fellow employee with what turned out to be a medical emergency. The employee notified DiNardo that she was having issues reaching her insulin-dependent diabetic husband. DiNardo contacted TPD for a well-being check, and then she and Sergeant Lowe accompanied the employee to her residence. Upon arrival, TPD located the victim unresponsive, suffering from a life-threatening diabetic episode. Sergeant DiNardo and Sergeant Lowe's quick response to investigate the concerns of their colleague helped avert a life-ending consequence. Field Training Officer Brian Claudius conducted the quarterly fire drill and reviewed the status of all SCBA units when he discovered the need to fill 24 units. Claudius contacted Brevard County Fire Rescue and initiated an immediate response to fill the numerous units. With the safety of the facility and its inhabitants in mind, Claudius went the extra mile to ensure that the emergency fire equipment was again returned to emergency use status. Brian is also being presented with a Commendable Service Award for his efforts. Corrections Corporals John Wright and Ed Medbury were transferring an inmate for medical treatment when they noticed that the inmate was in physical distress and had stopped breathing. The two immediately started CPR and performed it until Brevard County Fire Rescue could respond to their location. Due to Corporal Wright and Corporal Medbury's life-saving actions, the inmate made a full recovery. Both Wright and Medbury are also being presented a life-saving bar for their efforts. While assigned at the female facility, Corporal Regina Ellis received information that an inmate could possibly have a controlled substance in her possession. Ellis then conducted a security check in the dorm, located the suspected inmate, and separated her from the other inmates. The controlled substance was located, and because of Corporal Ellis's quick response to the information, she was able to remove a dangerous drug from the facility. Additionally, Regina is being recognized with a Commendable Service Award for her efforts. Sergeant Brian Seeley responded to assist with an unruly inmate who was scheduled to go to court. As deputies were escorting the inmate, he was able to break free and started running. Sergeant Seeley, without hesitation, chased after the inmate and was able to secure him, holding on to the inmate until additional deputies arrived. During this incident, Seeley was injured as a result of an inmate landing on his right leg, causing his knee to buckle sideways. Despite being in severe pain, Sergeant Seeley was still able to hold on to the inmate and prevent the inmate from escaping until help arrived.
Corrections Deputy of the Year.
Sergeant Michael Ingram exemplifies the qualities of excellence, integrity, and professionalism expected of a corrections deputy. As a retired, highly decorated air assault soldier with the U.S. Army and former corrections officer with DOC, Sergeant Ingram has utilized his leadership skills daily since he began his career with the Sheriff's Office in 2006. In addition to his day-to-day duties of scheduling, coordinating, and supervising over 80 personnel on his shift, Sergeant Ingram's technical expertise and superior performance led to his being named as the commander of the Corrections Response Team. Sergeant Ingram's outstanding intelligence gathering techniques and interpersonal skills led to an inmate providing information that resulted in the recovery of a stolen firearm hidden near a major shopping mall and skate park frequented by children. Additionally, further investigation led to the recovery of stolen property connected with the robbery. Ingram's endless involvement and commitment to the community has positively impacted the lives of hundreds of citizens. As a marathon runner and fitness activist, Sergeant Ingram uses his knowledge of fitness to train others during his off-duty time in completing the Physical Abilities Test, which has had a positive impact on the health, morale, and well-being of agency members.
Deputies of the Month.
Members of the Sheriff's Office responded to an incident of violence that resulted in severe injuries. Agent Nicholas Walker was assigned as lead investigator. As the investigation progressed, Agent Walker identified the suspects who had orchestrated a plan to ambush the victim at his residence for the purpose of killing him with a crowbar as retaliation. Walker was able to obtain arrest warrants for the attempted first-degree premeditated murder, and all three suspects were quickly arrested, charged, and as a result of the quality investigation pleaded guilty. Agent Walker is also being presented a bar of merit for his efforts. Deputy Matthew Simpson was off duty when he heard a bank robbery had just occurred. Deputy Simpson was in his personal vehicle and saw a subject walking from the area of the bank acting strangely. As Simpson followed the suspect, he turned and approached Deputy Simpson. Matt immediately jumped into action, observing several banded layers of U.S. currency protruding from the subject's pockets, and detained him without incident. A search revealed the robbery note that was given to the bank and the currency from the robbery. FTO Simpson is also being presented a bar of merit for his efforts. After responding in reference to a missing boater, deputies determined that 3 teens were camping on an island in the intercoastal waterway when a strong storm passed through. One of the campers, who was severely intoxicated, had disappeared. Corporal Brian Jones, Deputy William Hammer, and Deputy Christopher Ferrante braved the severe weather and initiated a search in the BCSO boat, locating the camper trying to stay afloat. Deputy Ferrante and Deputy Hammer pulled the male into the boat, but that wasn't the end of the story. As they returned to the shore, the intoxicated subject jumped from the boat back into the dark waters. They were able to relocate him where he was safely secured. Each is also being presented a bar of merit for their efforts. Corporal Justin Hope and FTO William Yearty responded to a call in reference to a suicidal subject. Upon arrival, the deputies started searching for the subject. The individual was located in a wooded area, bleeding from a deep cut on his arm and fading in and out of consciousness. While Corporal Hope retrieved his tourniquet, Yurty removed his inner belt from his uniform and used it as a makeshift tourniquet until Hope returned and applied the actual tourniquet. Had they not slowed the blood flow, the subject would likely have died. Corporal Hope and FTO Yurty are also being presented a life-saving bar for their efforts. Multiple emergency calls were received reporting someone screaming for help under a causeway bridge. Deputies responded and located a male on the construction scaffolding under the bridge. FTO Nicole Contos and another deputy were transported by boat to the area. Both deputies cautiously climbed the scaffolding and the man became increasingly agitated, at which point he attempted to jump off. Contos quickly leaned forward and grabbed the man by his belt, preventing him from falling approximately 30 feet, and he was safely escorted down. The actions taken by Contos likely prevented a loss of life. Deputy Contos is also being presented a life-saving bar for her efforts. Deputies Christina Petsos and Taylor Lakeman responded to a community gym for a medical emergency. It was reported a man collapsed while running on a treadmill and was unresponsive. Deputy Petsos immediately recognized that the male was in cardiac arrest and began CPR. While performing CPR, she simultaneously gave instructions to a witness on how to prepare her AED for use. Deputy Lakeman arrived seconds later and utilized the AED. Both deputies continued providing life-saving CPR to the victim until paramedics arrived. The victim made a full recovery. Deputies Lakeman and Petsos are also being presented a life-saving bar for their efforts. The Sheriff's Office was dispatched to a serious vehicle crash on I-95 with the occupants sustaining life-threatening injuries. Commander Paul Drinkwater arrived on scene, advising a fire was starting and people were still inside. Drinkwater and several off-duty BCFR employees began removing the occupants. Corporal Andrew Salazar and Deputy Greg Matthews arrived on scene and then attempted to move what they believed to be a deceased victim's body away from the burning car. They then discovered the victim was showing signs of life and began rendering life-saving aid. Were it not for the actions of Commander Drinkwater, Corporal Salazar and Deputy Matthews, it is very likely that these victims would not have survived. They are also being presented a life-saving bar for their efforts. Shortly after the Melbourne Police Department issued a bolo for a male that had just committed an armed robbery, Deputy Michael Mattison began patrolling the neighborhoods in the area the suspect was believed to have run to. He then noticed a male acting suspiciously. The individual was very agitated and nervously told Deputy Mattison that he had an active warrant for his arrest. After turning the individual over to MPD, Mattison responded back to where he had initially observed the suspect and located a backpack containing items matching the property from the robbery, and a mask and a handgun used in the crime. Deputy Mattison is also being presented a bar of merit for his efforts. A series of burglaries were committed where the suspect would enter open garages, move property, and flee in an SUV. Deputy Alicia Miller responded to investigate one of these burglaries and identified a witness who had wrote down the suspect's license plate number and eventually ID'd the suspect. Deputy Miller determined that the suspect had an extensive criminal history and discovered 2 new pawns by the suspect that matched items reported stolen. The suspect was arrested without incident. As a result of Alicia's investigation, agents were able to close 10 open burglary cases. Deputy Miller is also being presented a bar of merit for her efforts. Deputy Candace Watson, K9 Deputy Brian Fritz, and Agent Peter Steed were working a cruise terminal when they were notified of a cruise passenger in need of medical attention. They ran to the location and found a senior unresponsive and immediately initiated CPR. As Deputy Watson continued with CPR, Deputy Fritz and Agent Steed prepared the AED. After several shocks by the AED, the patient regained a pulse and started breathing. The patient was later transported to the hospital, awake and alert. The timely measures taken by these deputies saved the life of this victim, and each deputy is also being presented a life-saving bar for their efforts. K9 Deputy David Bowes and Deputy Timothy Liston responded to search for a suspect who fled on foot from a traffic stop. During the track, the deputies passed a vehicle and K9 Vader, who is also trained in drug detection, alerted to the vehicle. The deputies made note of the alert and location and continued on the track of the wanted suspect. After locating the suspect, they returned to the residence and initiated contact with the homeowner, discovering the homeowner was also the owner of the vehicle. The owner allowed the deputies to search the vehicle, and as a result of their efforts, 120 pounds of marijuana and $65,000 in cash were seized. Deputies Bowes and Liston are also being presented a bar of merit for their efforts.
Deputy of the Year.
Agent Mary Adams began her career with the Brevard County Sheriff's Office in 1996, working her way up through the agency. In 2012, Mary joined CIS, where she has proudly served in both the Special Investigations and Special Victims units. Of significance, Agent Adams initiated an investigation into allegations surrounding an adult who was sexually molesting a teen. Her investigation continued for another week and a half, during which time she was able to interview the suspect, who did not confess to the crimes, but did make several key admissions which supported probable cause for his arrest. Nearing the end of the investigation, Adams learned the suspect had threatened to leave the area, fearing arrest. Less than 24 hours later, he was located by the U.S. Marshals Service in Texas, just miles from the Mexican border. Once arrested, the federal authorities located a number of electronic devices that proved useful in Agent Adams' subsequent investigations into other alleged sexual activities with other juvenile victims. In all, 14 victims were identified as a result of Agent Adams' investigation. The suspect is currently facing a total of 75 charges ranging from lewd and lascivious molestation to possession of child pornography. Agent Adams performed a very difficult task which not only resulted in the successful closure to significant criminal cases, but allowed the victims the opportunity to begin the very long healing process without fear of this violent offender.